How's it going, everybody? Welcome to We Do Tech, and also to my review of the Z490 Master from AORUS Gigabyte, which is of course running on the new 1200 socket from Intel. So if you're looking to go for the new 10th generation CPUs, maybe like the i9-10900K, then this might be a nice pick for you. So let's check it out and see how it performs. So starting off with pricing, the Z490 Master is currently a Gigabyte's third top of the range board, retailing for around $390 on Amazon, or a predicted 10,000 Rand for here in South Africa, if you can get stock currently. Stock is quite limited. As for the design, Gigabyte still stick with the more armor styling with that grayish massive heat spreader on the M.2s and on the chipset, but along with the pretty large heat spreader on your VRMs and also on the I/O cover. However, it wouldn't be complete without some RGB, so you do have some on the I/O cover and then also on the chipset heat spreader. Now, like I mentioned before, the motherboard is equipped with Intel's new LGA 1200 socket, supporting the new 10th generation processors with the new thermal velocity boost feature also, which we get into a bit later. But being that the motherboard is designed for more overclockers, it should allow you to push your CPU to its limits while remaining cool. As for the VRMs, it does look like most of the new Z490 boards do have some really good setups, with the Master also using a 12+1 phase digital power design with the ISL69269 phase controller and an ISL6617 doublers that does have a 90 amp power rating. As for the fates, the Master uses the SL99390 that we have seen on some of the other high tier motherboards, so you know you're going to be pre-kitted out for your overclocking needs. However, unfortunately, because of limited stock currently, Gigabyte was only able to send over the i5-10500K, which is definitely a bit underrated for this board. But with the i5, I was able to get a steady overclock of 5.1 gigahertz on all 6 cores with a 1.4 volts. With that overclock, the VRMs never got past 40 degrees on a 30-minute IDA stress test. So again, it is a pretty overkill for the i5. It's going to handle that without any problems. But I did also watch some other reviews where they did use the i9-10900K, where it only reached a max of 64 degrees. So just like before, it won't be a problem if you go for the top of the range i9 CPU. Now, moving on to memory, you do get 4 dual channel DIMMs that support up to 128 gigs of DDR4 modules, running up to a massive 5,000 megahertz. 5 gigahertz on memory is already quite crazy. Now, each slot does feature Gigabyte's armor, which does increase durability and reduces board bending when installing your memory, which sometimes can add a bit of strain on the board. For your PCI Express slots, Intel is still using the older PCI Express 3.0 standard, but it's still good enough for all of our needs. On the Master, there is a total of 3 full-size 16x slots, with the top one running at full 16x speed, the middle running at 8x, and then the bottom at 4x. All of them do also feature Gigabyte's armor here for heavier cards. Also, both SLI and Crossfire is supported on the board with the top PCI Express slots. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's no 1x slots that we sometimes get on some other boards, but also I don't really think that's going to be too big of a problem, because you do have 3 16x slots, and then also you do have 3 M.2 slots underneath that massive heat spreader. These M.2 slots do support NVMe, SATA, and then also Optane for all of your memory, and goes up to the very long 22/110 size modules. Along with that, you do have your normal slowish storage with 6 SATA 3 ports. Now, something to keep in mind with your storage options, the middle M.2 slot does share bandwidth with the SATA 3 port, and then also the bottom M.2 shares with SATA 5 and 4. So depending on how you set your storage up, some might be disabled. But now moving on to I/O, you do get a very nice pre-installed I/O shield with a Q, flash, and a clear CMOS buttons. Your dual band Wi-Fi 6 plus a Bluetooth 5 and a 10, which is also included in the box. You do have 4 USB 2.0 ports, an HDMI 1.4 port, 4 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, one of them being a Type C, and another 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A ports. Along with that, you do have a nice 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, which is nice to see becoming more of a standard thing on some of these boards. And then lastly, for your audio, you do have your standard 5 audio jacks and then SPDIF output with a ESS Sabre ES9118 EQ DAC for some extra power for your headsets. But speaking of power, the Z490 Master does have the standard 24 pin for power, but it does feature also a Gigabyte's armor here to help prevent the board from bending when installing the power connection, which can sometimes bend the board a bit. You do also have dual 8 pins for your CPU, which will supply plenty of power for your 10-core i9. I've seen some of the other boards only feature an 8+4 pin, so having that additional 4 pins is a nice addition. Then just running up some of the other features and connections you get on the board, you do have your Q code and Q LEDs for post indications, 8 PWM fan headers, 7 internal temperature sensors, 2 USB 2.0 ports, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gigabit connection, a USB 3.2 Gen 1 5 gigabit connection, and then 2 Thunderbolt headers. For your RGB, again, like I mentioned before, you do have some RGB on your I/O cover and your chipset heat spreader, but you also have 2 5-volt addressable RGB Gen 2 headers and then 2 12-volt RGB headers, all of which can be controlled through Gigabyte's RGB Fusion. So if you want to sync that up with some of your other peripherals or your components, it's going to work nicely for that. But now quickly taking a look at the BIOS, it does look like Gigabyte updated it somewhat here, making it easier to navigate, especially for some new overclockers, but also for people who don't really want to tinker around with the overclocking. They're kind of a bit afraid sometimes. AORUS also made it easy to get just a tiny bit more performance out of your CPU with their gaming and advanced CPU upgrade options. With the i5 that Gigabyte again sent over, I was able to add an extra 100 megahertz to all cores on the gaming profile and 300 megahertz on the advanced option, and that's along with the turbo boost that you get with the Intel CPUs already. So I was able to get around 4.8 gigahertz, I believe, or 4.9 on my i5 with all 6 cores, which is not too bad with just a single option there. But that's pretty much it for my review of the new Z490 Master from AORUS. It's a pretty good motherboard, I have to say. I had no problems with anything, especially for the VRMs. I am glad to see that VRMs aren't really that big of an issue anymore, especially if you are going to go for something high-end like the Z490 boards. If you want to pair it up with like the i9s, then this is definitely going to be an option for that. I do also like that AORUS added plenty of their armor on pretty much all of their connections, your memory, your PCI Express slots, and even your power connections for your motherboard and for your CPU, because that does add some strain on the board as well. And also you do actually have your armor here at the back of the board as well, just to add some additional durability there. Now, something that I did find a bit weird was that Gigabyte, instead of going with the standard grayish thermal pads for your VRM setups to help keep it cool, they instead went with some orange ones. Now, the orange is a Gigabyte color scheme, but it does kind of stand out a bit, especially because it is overlapping on the edges. So it's very noticeable if you do actually look around the CPU socket. Now, again, I'm not exactly sure why they went with that, especially on more of a grayish board. But it is there, it works, it keeps everything cool, so it's not that big of an issue, really. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you are looking for a new Z490 board, then the Master is definitely an option that you can take a look at. Also going for around $400-ish. It is a bit more up there, but if you want to pair it for something like the i9 again, then definitely an option that you need to take a look at. But that's pretty much it. A big thanks to Gigabyte for sending this board over for review. And if you guys want to get it for yourself, I will leave links in the video description if it's available already. And then I will check all of you next time. Cheers, guys.